Did you know a Black American university in Alabama, United States, serves as the blueprint for the first ever university in South Africa to educate Black South Africans, linking Black Americans and Black South Africans through education? On this fourth episode of The Thread, I'm going to tell you that story right now. This is Booker T. Washington. He was a Black American entrepreneur, philosopher, thinker who believed that Black Americans should not wait for the government or any kind of outside help to support them. They should rely on themselves. So in 1881, he was brainstorming with a few other colleagues about how to turn these ideas into an actual institution. And that's when he started dreaming up Tuskegee Institute. It would become a school built on these very ideas that he thought of. Black Americans driving their own self-sufficiency and economic advance. So in 1881, a one-room church called the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which was a Black American-led church, became Tuskegee Institute's first ever funder and held their first classes. A few years later down the line, Tuskegee would continue to grow. The students would actually start building a university, creating their own bricks in a kiln. They literally built Tuskegee brick by brick with their own hands and with their own tools and resources, and it started to grow and become very popular. Booker T. Washington recruited renowned scientist at the time, George Washington Carver. He knew about farming and how to grow indigenous plants and everything in American soil. He was an entrepreneur as well. Booker T was like, hey, please come be the principal. And while at Tuskegee, George Washington Carver developed a curriculum to focus more on agricultural advancement, as well as focused on teaching the students about how to leverage agriculture and how to create revenue out of farming. Tuskegee, over the years, grew to be an extremely prominent and successful university built by Black Americans, funded by Black Americans, taught by Black Americans, attended by Black Americans as well. But one of the most awesome things about this HBCU and other HBCUs at the time, they did a lot of work in supporting exiled Black South Africans. One of the students was witness to seeing Tuskegee grow because she was part of the AME Church. Charlotte McClellan was studying at Wilberforce University in Ohio. And Charlotte would write home letters to her cousin, who would then talk to the uncle about this Black-controlled Methodist church in America at the time, who was in charge of the Ethiopian Church, a Black South African led church that broke away from the white-led style churches that were kind of dominant pre-apartheid here in South Africa. After a couple years of correspondence in Pretoria, there was a conference where Black American-led AME Church came to South Africa and merged together, while Tuskegee and the AME Church were progressing along in the West. Here in South Africa in 1916, a few Scottish missionaries were tossing around the idea that they wanted to start an educational space and institution specifically for Black South Africans to get higher education, because something like that didn't exist at all in the country at that time. And they went to the AME Church, spoke with John Tango Jabavu, which was a prominent figure at the time here in South Africa in the AME Church. And they got together and discussed, championing higher education. And it would actually be Jabavu's son, DDT, who would travel to the United States and spend 1 year at Tuskegee following Booker T. Washington, around observing the students, what they were reading, how they were building their ideas of self-reliance and economic advancement. And he came back to South Africa and they launched South African Native College, which would be the first ever higher education institution here in South Africa, focused on educating specifically Black South Africans. Even though most of the education was Eurocentric, so it was very Western and very white-centered, DDT focused on what he learned at Tuskegee, and he implemented an agricultural program at the university, which taught students how to grow indigenous fruits and vegetables, as well as the business side, economic advancement and self-reliance, self-sustainability, and how to use the community for economic advancement. Students would share around Black American writing, and they would share it in the residence halls. They would bring it in debate settings, and a lot of their thoughts outside of the Western Eurocentric education they were using was Black American thought that they learned from what DDT brought from Tuskegee. Eventually, once apartheid kicked in, a lot of the radical thinkers and Pan-African thinkers would leave, and the school would be rebranded as Fort Hare University and would be an ethnic university focused only on educating Xhosa people. Tuskegee and Fort Hare literally shaped how Black people can create prosperity. First of all, this idea of a circular economy, creating the products that they need to sustain communities. The idea to fit this idea could be kind of a 3D printer shop where Black people can own a 3D printer and kind kind of print materials or tools or things that Black people need. Another way is monetizing food knowledge. What about the idea of a diasporic recipe vault, where such recipes can be used by companies or different institutions, but then the owners and founders of these recipes are paid back royalties or licensing fees? But Fort Hare, our South African Native College, as well as Tuskegee, really teaches us that when we center Black Afrocentric thought, can create a number of amazing products that we haven't even thought of, like products that can change the world and improve the prosperity for Black people, improve the lives for Black people, for community members, or all types of folks. Just to come together and think, to solve problems with their own brains, can definitely reduce poverty.